Hello, everyone, and welcome to this final installment of our Juneteenth webinar series. This one is titled, Making DEI Visible in an Invisible Institution. I want to give just a few seconds for everyone to log in, and then we will get started. Okay, we do want to let everyone know that this webinar is being recorded and it will be added to the Nrmn YouTube channel following the ending of the webinar. Before we get started, I do want to give a brief introduction into the National Research Mentoring Network, or Nrmn. Founded in 2014, Nrmn is an NIH grant-funded initiative whose entire purpose is to diversify the STEM workforce. We do this by providing researchers across all career stages in the biomedical, behavioral, clinical, and social sciences field with evidence-based mentorship and professional development programming that emphasizes the benefits and challenges of diversity, inclusivity, and culture. Our program achieves that through mentorship, networking, and professional development through our online networking platform of Nrmn, which has over 22,000 mentors and mentees. We do encourage you all to visit our website, nrmnnet.net, to learn more about our resources, and I will add the links to our social medias, our YouTube channel, and our websites in the chat as soon as I am finished with the introductions. Nrmn is delighted to provide this opportunity for everyone to participate in this webinar and have your questions directly answered by these incredibly talented panelists. We will be offering a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So we do encourage you to type any questions you may have in the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. And lastly, from Nrmn, we want to give a special thank you to the Making DEI Visible in an Invisible Institution panelists for making this webinar happen. And now I will pass it over to Dr. Hinton to begin the webinar.
Morning, everyone, and thank you so much for coming to the webinar. So I would love to get everyone's just name, who they are, what research you're doing, whether it's education research, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion research, or scientific research in the traditional sense, if you will. So I just want that. I'll start with Dr. Schuler, and then we'll just go. Dr. Schuler will call on the next person. If your name is not right on the display, please change it if you don't mind. So that we all can know what your beautiful name is. And then after that, I will start and go back to Dr. Schuler and ask her the first question, which will be, what does DEI mean in the workplace? And then I'll subsequently call on several individuals per question so that everyone can kind of get a feel for things. All individuals won't be asked the same question so that we can get through everything, okay? And so thank you so very much. And we'll start with just your name, Dr. Schuler, and who you are and what you do.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Schuler, and I am at Winston-Salem State University, and I am currently now working more with DEI, professional development and mentoring with our biology and chemistry majors at the university. Right now, my research is mainly focused on DEI, STEM education, and work-life balance, and along with employee engagement. I enjoy what I'm doing. It is a lifelong learning progress for me, and I'm happy to be on this panel this morning. And I will call on Dr. Davis.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. I'm Jermaine Davis. I'm assistant professor at Meharry Medical College. My research centers around structural biology, genetics of disease, and health disparities. And I'm happy to be here. I will call on Dr. Spencer.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Elsie Spencer, and I'm an administrative director for the National Center for Children and Families and for the Consortium for Policy Research and Education at Teachers College, Columbia University. And I'm also a postdoc fellow in Dr. Hinton's laboratory at Vanderbilt. My research encompasses on various topics centered on STEM pipelines, postdoc and faculty recruitment in STEM fields, and the important role that mentoring plays in promoting DEI within STEM in higher education. So I guess I will pass it off to Mariah.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mariah Sweetwine, and I'm a cell biologist at the University of Washington, and my lab focuses on aging in the kidney. And my involvement in DEI work is sort of nascent, so I'm really excited to get to be on this panel and get to learn from all of you. I'm participating in work for my department because I am one of the few underrepresented minorities in my rather large West Coast department. And I will call on Dr. Thomas.
Good morning. My name is Jessica Thomas, and I'm a postdoc at Vanderbilt University. And I am conducting research with CAMK2 alpha and its role in somatic sensation, as well as in a ASD mouse model.
And Dr. Damo will be the last one.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Damo. I'm the chair of the Department of Life and Physical Sciences at Fisk University. And I am a structural biologist, biophysical chemist by training. My group is interested in looking at molecular mechanisms at the host pathogen interface. And it's great to be here.
Thank you all for doing this. We really appreciate this. So let's get started on this panel with further ado. So Dr. Schuler, would you start us off and talk about what does DEI mean in the workplace?
Sure, good question. DEI in the workplace composed of three components, and that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you have to understand the meaning of each word before you can actually have DEI. DEI in my field is more than just an event. It is a skill set, a competency. It is an intentional plan for making your workplace an access to and for your employees. So what is diversity? Diversity is more than just having a different set of people with different genders, different backgrounds. It is also composed of the psychological, physical, and social differences among that group of people. So it just cannot be male, female, gender related, age related. It just not can be racial related, ethnicity related. It has to be composed of the entire human being, where we have male, female, where we have African American, white American, or where we have the Asians, the LGBTQ community now. So that's diversity in one concept. These differences also come with different backgrounds. So there's cultural differences in diversity. There's different mindsets in diversity, okay? Then what is equity? With all those differences in background, gender, social, economic status, or social cultures, there should be a component where everyone is treated equally. They have equal access to advancement. They have equal access to opportunities. They have equal access to speaking their voice. Okay, so then when we talk about inclusion, inclusion is that component within DEI that says we are all included. That means we're all in this bigger environment, even though we have these little differences as a human being, we can feel inclusion comes in when we feel comfortable, when we feel like we have a safe environment where we can speak our voice, even though our perspectives may be different. And I must feel safe in this environment to speak my voice, to feel that my voice is valued, to feel that my voice matters, and to feel like my voice is not something where you give me a space where I can just speak something and it's heard, but it's not valued. So DEI, that's what we have to have, those three components. Now, how do those components work in the workplace, lab, or just in any environment, in a family setting as well? When you put those three together, everything is intentional. Intentional, meaning that I'm going to set goals, I'm going to be intentional with setting strategies, and I'm going to set some measurable strategies where I can look at data and say, am I really making any progress with DEI in my corporation? You can't just say, I gave a program like Black History Month, we get 1 month. It has to be every month. Just can't be an Asian celebration. That's what it is. It's a celebration. It's an event. But what DEI is strategies and goals that included in your mission statement and your values as a company and as your goals. These are intentional goals that are measured, just like you measure performance, your work performance. You're going to have intentional goals set so you can measure them. And you're going to have points where you can measure them. You're not going to wait to the end of the year to see if we have DEI. They're going to be measured at certain stages, just like your work performance is measured 2 or 3 times a year. You want to be able to look at your data to say, okay, yes, we are tracking diversity. We are tracking it and making it a part of our flavor of our company. This is who we are. This is our core. This is our essence. And without that, you're just having a program. So I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Dr. Schuler. I think everybody should talk about this question, and then I'll target the rest of them to specific people. So that way we can hear your unique experiences, which is something that's key when we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, is the innovation piece. And that is something that doesn't come about without having individuals from different backgrounds talk about this. But since we're talking about Juneteenth in particular and keeping that essence of what it should be over the course of this month, that is why everyone is from a diverse background from the diaspora, if you will. So I'm going to change that question over to Dr. Damo. And then from Dr. Damo, you just call on an individual and then we'll go from there and go right ahead.
Great, thanks, Dr. Hinton. And so, you know, I'll give some of my own, you know, personal takes, and you know, I agree so much with what Dr. Schuler said in terms of the definition of DEI. I'm gonna pick off a couple of points that she made and just emphasize them. And she, you know, she mentioned that DEI must be part of, you know, the mission statement, and I think, you know, that's extremely important, whether we're talking about, you know, globally or our scientific community of scientists, or, you know, the institution that you're at, the department you're in, or even down, you know, to your research group, is that it's really important that you specifically, you know, work to define what DEI means to the, you know, to all the relevant stakeholders, because DEI is not a one size fits all approach. It's not like, you know, we're just going to come up with, you know, this is the way to do it and everyone has to do it, because, you know, every community is going to be, you know, comprised of different constituents, and you have, and it's imperative that you are aware of, you know, who the constituents are, and, you know, make their voices be heard, you know, in this space. And then, of course, you know, it's not, again, you know, I agree wholeheartedly. It's, you know, it's not an event. It's, you know, it's a philosophy. It's something that's intentional. It's something that we always, you know, do and live in the day to day. And, you know, speaking specifically as a scientist, right? I mean, this, you know, there are many, you know, many issues that we all recognize that, you know, we have one of the greatest jobs in the world, right? I mean, you know, how cool is it that we're tasked with developing, you know, new knowledge and making the world a better place. But, you know, but, you know, science is this very sort of, you know, objective, neutral, absolute thing. But, you know, the scientific enterprise is comprised of people, right? And it's actions of people. And we are not, you know, necessarily agnostic of all these things. We all have, you know, different backgrounds. And so we have to, you know, be aware. You know, we have our own experiences, but you realize, you know, and speaking as a faculty member, right, as a faculty member that mentors students, you know, I have my experiences, which shapes the way I mentor and train students, but my students aren't me necessarily, right? And so, you know, just because this worked for me doesn't mean it's going to work for them. And so I have to be able to have a conversation to understand, you know, where are my students at, and what can I do, you know, in their best interest to empower them to get to achieve the goals that they want to achieve. And, you know, so in the interest of time, you know, of course, all of us can talk about this all day, but I will pass it off to my colleague, Dr. Davis from Meharry.
Thanks, Dr. Damo. Yeah, I not sure how much more I can add, but I definitely think the favorite word in talking about DEI is intentional. I think, you know, it's no surprise that we've had an issue with diversity for decades. And as much as we talked about it, you know, a lot of our concerns have not been addressed. Fortunately, we are at the point where the relevant people are taking note, listening, and learning. And the fact that it is a learning process is important because we're doing this together. So I think that it's a great time because, you know, particularly in biomedical sciences, you know, we have the concept of making life better for everyone, but we realize that we haven't been doing that effectively. That there are some populations that have been overlooked. And the first thing to do is recognize that. And so that's kind of one of the first issues that really has to come into play if DEI is to be organic. You really have to just think about and say, well, you know, our goal is to help everyone, but are we helping everyone? And so when companies, institutions, labs take that assessment, they can then cater the DEI efforts and initiatives specific for that institution, lab, department, or whatever, because as it was mentioned before, it's going to vary from place to place with person to person, but the outcomes still need to be the same. We still want to see people invited to the table, included, our voices heard, as well as representing, you know, the population that we're aiming to help. And so we know that there are challenges along the way, but the first thing is panels such as this is addressing some of the concerns that have been overlooked consistently over time. And you realizing, you know, I've started doing community engagement work and I've learned so much, realizing that there's a need and an acknowledgement that there have been, you know, not ideal conditions, but this is how we're going to move past that and work together to actually address some of the challenges that we face together, because together we're better. So I think that it's an important, useful, necessary tool that has to be, you know, approached with attention and assessment at various time points as well, because, you know, as your environment and culture changes, so too does your initiative and the way you approach it. So I think that it's very timely and important, and really a learning process. You know, I'm learning a lot of how other people do things, other labs and institutions. And I can adopt some of those best practices that seem to work. And so I'm happy for the opportunity to kind of grow individually in my lab and in my institution, but also as a community. So I will pass it over to Dr. Sweetman.
I just really love what everyone said so far, and I'll be brief, but I think for me, one of the things that's really important for people to understand about DEI is that there is no D without the E and the I. So I think that's where institutions have gone wrong for a really long time. There's been a big, sort of emphasis on diversity, which comes without any kind of support system. And so it's the idea that if you just put all the same people in the room, it works. And if you put different people in the room, it works. And there needs to be an understanding that I think what Dr. Davis was saying, makes a lot of sense. DEI is growth, right? It's an ongoing process for everybody all the time, for institutions. And so there is no one, sort of formula that you're going to put in place that's going to work now and in 10 years and in 20 years. And the idea is that we're always reassessing and changing and making sure that we're actually serving the people who are what an institution is really supposed to be. And then I think I would say equity is not sameness. Equity comes with the recognition of individuality. And so I think that that's where that needs to be. And if you don't have inclusivity, if you don't make people feel welcome, then you will never maintain. You can bring in as much diversity as you want, and you'll never maintain it, and it will be a constant turnover. And so that's something I've seen a lot in my own career and in the institutions that I've participated in. And I am going to pass it on to Dr. Spencer.
Thank you. Seems like as we go further down the line, everyone just kind of touches upon everything. So I'm just going to speak a bit more about higher ed and then the workplace. So higher ed does consist of the educational aspect, but we also have to talk about the employment aspect. So not just faculty, but staff. That's a group of very important people that can also be mentors, right? And so all this starts with, how do we initially recruit people? How do we bring people into the fold? So it's being intentional about that. When we're looking at, applicants, potential applicants, a lot of institutions are becoming test optional because research shows that, test taking does not show someone's intellectual capacity. It's more an indicator of socioeconomic background. So having a more holistic approach in terms of the students that we're bringing in is definitely helpful for DEI efforts. Now, with regards to staff, what type of job descriptions are we putting out there? Does everybody really need to have a minimum of a bachelor's? Like, how can we equate a bachelor's with experience? And having these different sort of perspectives also adds into the conversations that we have at tables. Faculty talk about, I have a lot of things going on. I'd like to mentor, I spend more time mentoring, but I can't because of my other commitments. Staff are sitting there like, I know a lot of the stuff that goes on here. I'm part of the culture. I think taking advantage of that definitely helps with regards to DEI, because we're not just talking about DEI in terms of racial makeup, but also file and rankings as well. So that's something I wanted to put out there that's just very important that sometimes gets left out of the conversation. And of course, making that environment welcoming. How are we getting people to feel comfortable, to feel welcomed, to feel important, to create this sense of community? And that's what that encompasses. It's just having different perspectives, having different experiences, and how we can blend all that together into something that is positive, that is goal attaining, that is measurable, like Dr. Schuler was saying, having these measurable sort of plans and then trying to assess where we're at in terms of goal reaching. So I think that's definitely another aspect that's important. And I guess I'm going to hand off the baton to Dr. Thomas.
I agree with what everyone has said so far. And I guess from my perspective, as I'm transitioning up the ranks in academia, I like what Dr. Davis said is it has to be intentional. These employers have to identify their population, who they're trying to target for DEI, and they have to create opportunities and access for them. And I've noticed as I go up, the emphasis has been less on DEI. The opportunities have been less for DEI. But like you said, it's nice that now they're starting to take notice of this problem. So that's just my personal experience.
You are so right.
Yes, thank you. You're right about that. It is, so I'm just gonna kind of tie all the thoughts in. Dr. Thomas touched on something that was very interesting, and it's true, as data has provided, which we can provide, I can drop that in the link for you in the chat. Basically, the data sums up that African Americans make up less than 5% of like full-time faculty. And also the data suggests that even as you go up the ranks, as you said, in the faculty, there's less and less that are actually full professors. And so one thing to think about is how do you create this access? Because there is no longer the myth that Black investigators don't exist, or other marginalized groups, if you will, don't exist. It's just creating the opportunity and outsourcing it broad enough so that it can reach the communities that it needs to reach. And thinking about publishing things only in journals may not be the only way to entice individuals for those faculty positions. Maybe it has to be working with those individuals, groups that are found in social media that are in science-based groups, such as like the Latinx BME group or Black and X group, if you will. And so those are things that we have to commonly think about. How are we reaching the people and creating access, which is something that is not often discussed. And so I want to kind of move on to targeted questions. And so the next thing for me is, how do you make DEI visible at an institution, and why does this matter? And so I'm going to actually ask two individuals to answer this, then we're going to move to the next one. So I'm going to ask Dr. Schuler and Dr. Spencer to do this one, and then Dr. Damo and Dr. Davis be on deck for the next question, which is, how do you elevate diversity in STEM? How do you move beyond the Diversity Day in STEM? Okay, so that's just to let you kind of think about that while Dr. Schuler or Dr. Spencer gets started. I'll start with Dr. Spencer this time, then go to Dr. Schuler to sum it all up with the question. Go ahead, Dr. Spencer.
Sure. So the first thing that came into my mind when you asked that question in terms of how do you make it visible goes back to mentoring. How many faculty do we have that are mentoring people of color that are of color? So that's the first thing that I would definitely say would address the issue of visibility for DEI. And a lot of the research does suggest that students of color actually work better in terms of the mentoring process with someone that's already been through the system that is of color. And forming that relationship, understanding perspectives, having the emotional quotients is definitely something that the mentoring process and someone of color is almost given that they have, because they went through those experiences. They went through those doors that they've left open for the person coming through. So I think that is definitely an important aspect of visibility in DEI. Dr. Schuler, did you want to add in?
Sure, Dr. Spencer, and I agree totally with what you said. And I'm gonna take it a step further with the mentoring and start with, how do you make it visible, beginning with leadership? Leadership has a strong voice. And as we have all come through COVID is one of those pandemics that have shown all businesses, whether it's higher education or in the private sector, our strengths and our weaknesses. It's an opportunity to reset the button, depending on which side of the pendulum you're on. So with leadership, I would say leadership would require mentor. They need mentors that are, and they have to be willing to be mentored, and being mentored as a lifelong learner, being mentored under the topic of DEI, being informed, learning how to collaborate with other leaders outside their organization, how to stay informed about different DEI initiatives that are working, that have been measured, that are successful, and not trying to copy that for their company, but tailor it to their company and to their organization. They can also continue to make DEI a top priority in their organization. It's just like whether it's for profit or nonprofit, we all have a top priority, and that is to engage the community. To get in education, we want students. In a business, we want customers. And in education, our students are our customers. So if we start making our customers a priority along with our employees, and wanting to retain and engage those employees, and also being able to be edge up on our competitors, we're going to keep DEI and leadership as a top priority. Then I would say we will also can make it visible in organizations when leaders start making it a top priority. When leaders start making it a priority to engage their employees, when our leaders decide that this is what we need to collaborate cross-culturally and to be in the top 10 or the top 20 and whatever it is we're serving, because sooner or later, and I think it's going to be later, we're going to find out that collaboration, teamwork, retention are the game changers, and the game changers are the foundation is DEI.
Thank you so very much. And so we're going to transition to Dr. Davis and Dr. Damo. Do you need the question repeated before you start?
No, I have it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so go ahead.
I guess, yeah, I was just kind of reveling in what Dr. Schuler said, because that's how the question is, I'll just repeat it, how do you elevate diversity in STEM? And I feel that there are different components to this, particularly the leadership, right? I think that it has to come from the top, because it actually has to be ingrained in the fabric of the culture. So leadership and money, right? I think that the investment in diversity in STEM is important. We know that there's certain metrics and activities that we see that increase diversity. But I think that one of the other things that has to be consistent. So you have, whether you do it on the lab, kind of in your lab level versus the institution, department or institution, you want to really think about the different ways to kind of celebrate diversity. And that can be just, having a quick mention in lab meeting. I think one of the key things that I've learned in the past year is not everyone who went to school in America learned about Juneteenth, right? So that's such an important part. Why did we celebrate July 4th, but we don't celebrate Juneteenth? And I think that people are starting to realize that there have been some inconsistencies, but recognizing these small tidbits that actually promote different diverse communities will help to visualize DEI. I think schools are taking an effort to reshape this, because typically you would see on the walls all white men. Now that's changed to recognize that that is not providing a complete picture. And so to celebrate diversity, there are more pictures going on the wall of different people. I think that's one of the key ways that really ingrains it into the culture of an institution. And so I think that once you do these type of activities, it will move beyond, okay, well, let's do something for Black History Month, or, there's so many Black Americans that contributed to US history, but, we're constantly hearing about the great work of Martin Luther King, but there were other people that created or had great contributions to US history over the time. So recognizing that, and also doing a small part to maybe inform your group or your department. I think those would be key ways to kind of move beyond Diversity Day.
Dr. Damo?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Kim for the chance to speak, and Dr. Davis for your words. So a couple things that I want to add briefly is that, you know, in talking about, you know, STEM in general, and, you know, of course, so all of us in the panel, we're all in, you know, higher education, but we have to realize that, you know, we're not just isolated to the ivory tower, and our community goes beyond that. And so we have to be aware that, you know, encouraging students to go into STEM careers happens at an early age, right? Even, you know, my children who I have 2 young children, right? But, you know, it's pretty, as soon as they could talk, they like dinosaurs and they like space, and, you know, and we have to encourage this, you know, their interest in science all the way from, you know, from when they're little to college and beyond. And so, I think we have to recognize that, you know, there are aspects there that, as, you know, college, university level, you know, scientists, we also have to be involved with the much younger generation as well. And then the other thing too is that, you know, we hear a lot about leadership. Leadership is, you know, is really important, and this is at all levels, from your, you know, from your chancellor or your president of the university, you know, to, you know, so there's a trend, you know, not all institutions have it, but many do have, you know, a vice president of diversity, or, you know, something along those lines. And then all the way down, and we go to the department level, you know, the leadership has to be everyone. And it's not just, you know, we talked about the scarcity of underrepresented you know, faculty members. It's not just their job to do the diversity, right? It's not the job of the one female in your department, or the one underrepresented minority, or you know, or the one, you know, underrepresented, you know, sort of broadly defined. It's, you know, everyone has a responsibility to recognize this and contribute to it, right? Because we all have our own, you know, personal experiences, and the whole idea about diversity is that it's the difference in the experiences that we can all learn from, right? The fact that people have different, you know, opinions and histories to shape their you know, their science moving forward.
Thank you very much. And so I'm going to transition just straight into the next question. So Dr. Thomas, we'll start with you. The question is, are there individuals in STEM forgotten about? Are there individuals in STEM that are forgotten about? And how do you kind of change that? And how does that have an impact on others, if you will? So examples, just for individuals that may not know in the audience, what I mean by that is, we're just not talking about Black people. Now we're talking about individuals that are from minoritized groups that may be forgotten. So that might be someone that is a person that may have autism, that's an outstanding PhD student. That may be someone that's of an older age, that's a veteran, and that's trying to actually recapture what it's like to have the educational experience. That may be someone that is, you know, let's say from an underserved population. That may be someone that is, you know, Black, white, or from the LGBTQIA+ community as well. So I want you all to think about the framing of the question and what it's really embodying. It's talking about individuals. And so that's how I would love for you to answer this question. So Dr. Thomas, could you go ahead and start, and then we'll transition, and then you call on the next person, and then we'll go on to the next question after that.
Okay, I guess for me, what I'm dealing with now personally is being a new mother. So I think as women become more involved in STEM and they're thinking about motherhood, how does that fit into how you navigate going through the ranks? And when we talk about it as a whole, like you said, like people and maybe with ASD or non-traditional people, I think one of the keys is to create some type of community and access to resources, and it has to be almost individualized in some essence as well. I mean, as a mother, I think we need, like I said, or not even a mother, just a parent, like a sabbatical, just to regroup without consequence to your career. Because not everyone can transition back into that field. And it's a pandemic, having a child in a pandemic, there was no access to childcare like there used to be. And so that puts you behind. And how does the employer see that and the struggles that you may have, and what things are set up for you and community for you to help advance you and get you back on the right path. And that could go for any individual that may be non-traditional in a sense. And let's see, I will pass it on to Dr. Sweetwine.
Yeah, I so feel you on that sabbatical, and maybe even just a nap. I'll take a nap. I had a baby just a few months before the pandemic started. And so I call it a pandemic, like it's just all one swirling thing. But I think what you're really getting at is intersectionality, right? And I think also it touches again on DEI as growth. And it doesn't just mean growth within the institution, changes to the policies within the institution, but recognizing that the needs of individuals also change through their career as their sort of career trajectory changes, and also as their life outside of the institution changes. And so having institutions that are able to recognize that and are able to pivot with people is, I think, what's going to really make a success or not a success. And so having things really be available for anybody, so that when they start to step into a new intersectional place, maybe you've got someone in your community who is not out, right, but is not heterosexual, and they come out. That's a change that they need to be able to make. People who transition gender while they're in the workplace. And I think one of the things that happens a lot in DEI spaces and institutions is that we compartmentalize people. So we still really, really, really want to have these structures that are recognizable. And so we compartmentalize people. You're Black, you're Hispanic, you're gay, and we have to remember that, you know, there has to be room for people to kind of move in and out of those spaces. And I experience that a lot. I identify as Black, but I'm a biracial woman, and so it's not recognized a lot by people. And so for me, I always sort of have this strange dichotomy of like, this is the culture that is my culture, but it is not the culture that I'm addressed with when I'm in the workspace. And so I think there's a lot of invisible diversity also that happens for people that doesn't get recognized because we make assumptions by having check boxes instead of really talking to people and finding out who they are.
That is powerful. Thank you both for sharing that. And I think it's something that we all have to really kind of consider when we're talking about individuals, recognizing that they're an individual. So you got the key thing about the question and then the intersectionality, which I think is also important. So there's multiple identities that are shared. So I'm going to start singling questions so that we have a little bit of time left. We're going to stop around at, like I say, 11:55, so we can answer some questions at the end so we don't go over time. And so I'm going to target one question, one person answers. So the first question would be Dr. Schuler. What are ways to take action on diversity, equity, inclusion in the workplace? And could you do that for us?
Sure. It goes back to what I said in the beginning. It has to be intentional. And we have to see from the top, whether it's president, vice president, chancellor, whoever is at the top that has that stronger voice to say that this is now going to become a priority. And we're going to do a roadmap, which is a strategy. We're going to do a roadmap, design this roadmap to incorporate DEI in part of our mission. It's going to be a value point in who we are as an institution. And then we're going to go ahead and set those DEI strategies and design them to match our measurable outcomes or our KPIs that are going to be those performance measurements, how we're performing when we're talking about DEI. Then we're going to have those checkpoints. And we're going to collect this data, we're going to analyze this data, and we're going to use the results of the data that we've collected to either strengthen or to take away some things in our particular roadmap. This roadmap is going to be what is necessary to be flexible, speaking to the points that we were talking about with the females who are now mothers, or whether it's a male that is now a parent. We have to be flexible when we're talking about DEI. And I would say lastly, that we don't give up if something does not work after the first set of measurements. We're going to go back and we're going to continue to get it right, because it's forever evolving. Social cultures and competencies and needs are ever evolving. We see that again with COVID. COVID has shown us so many things, and all we have to do is just take our time to make it a priority instead of an event, and treat everyone as a human being first. We are humans before we are a gender. We are humans before we are parents. We are humans before we're a student or an employee. So that's my take on that.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schuler. Dr. Sweetwine, could you answer about equity and equality? Are they really the same thing? You know, are there some differences that we should really think about?
Yeah, so no, equity and equality are not the same thing, but it doesn't mean they don't overlap. So, you know, when we talk about equality, we talk about same, everybody equal. You're cutting a slice of cake and everybody gets the same size cake. When we're talking about equity, I need more cake. Sometimes I need more cake. It's been that kind of a day. And so, and I think where we go really wrong in sort of creating DEI spaces, and particularly when you're at a majority institution like I am. I'm in Seattle, Washington. It's a very, very, you know, sort of white majority city and a white majority institution. I think one of the places where we go very wrong is we look at altering what people are receiving for support as being extra, because we focus on just that one thing that somebody's getting a little extra support in, which would be equity. And we forget that the reality is that everybody needs something a little more or a little extra somewhere. Some people have really great interpersonal skills. Some people are great lab managers. Some people, you know, are great writers. Some people aren't. And everybody kind of needs to sort of, as they're building up their careers, especially have those different areas of support. And so when you focus on just sort of one point of this person got more than that person, rather than saying our end goal is that everybody gets to this place and has these capabilities, it starts to create this feeling that there's some sort of, you know, extra or inequality that's happening. And that's really the problem with sort of equating those two things. And so the equality should be, we're all equally successful at an equal successful plane when we're at any particular level in our career. And the equity is that we all have different skill sets that we bring and things that we need to build up to get there. And so I think that's how I define those two aspects.
Thank you so very much. And so I'm going to target the next question. I'm going to pitch in a little bit on this question because I think it's very dense. But Dr. Spencer, I'd love for you to start for the question about what's the difference between DEI, EDI, idea, and JEDI, if you will. You can take the first or the second. I can take the last two.
Yeah.
That's a lot. So
yeah, you gave me a very heavily packed question, so I'm going to attempt my best at trying to differentiate between the acronym. So DEI, everyone knows as diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the difference between that and say JEDI. DEI focuses more on like facilitating workshops on things like microaggressions and implicit biases and welcoming environments for people of color. And it's focused more on the perspectives and interactions between people from different cultures. So with regards to JEDI, which stands for Justice, Equity, Diversion, and Inclusion, that's become sort of a more popular term for like branding committees, academic committees, and labeling things that we've talked about, STEM with the extra M in the end for science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. And those initiatives are focused more on, as I said, the social justice perspectives. So these are like new topics that we're actually talking about in comparison with each other, that they do intersect, but they do have very distinct components to them. And then Dr. Hinton also, the other two at you, how to differentiate the idea and EDI.
Sure. So IDEA is referring to inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility, or action, depending on who you talk to. And then also JEDI, as we like to say, kind of like if you're in Star Wars, if you will, is justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so if you think about it, we'll start with the Star Wars concept. Star Wars is kind of like, you know, you have your lightsaber, you wanted some things to get done right away. And so that's kind of what you think of when you're capturing that. You're adding a new focus around the terms diversity, equity, inclusion. You're now needing action to happen, not just talk about these concepts and rehearse them at an institution as if this is the framework and the leadership team saying like, we're doing all these things, but where's the justice? Where's the social action, right? Meaning like, now what is the framework of the institution? Has it changed to incorporate these things where, yes, you may have a diversity day, but now it's a standing thing. Yes, you may have a Juneteenth event, but it's an endowment on actually having it for, you know, the foreseeable future. And then you also are giving access to other individuals to be able to do multiple things where they're a space for each person to exist separately and together, right? And then if there's an initiative that's happening around the institution, let's say, you know, what's going on now, then you actually have a task force to get you to that topic and where you can actually hear what the voice of the institution is talking about. And the last concept really quickly is just accessibility. Not everyone is thought about in such that you're an able body, you know, so some of us have sleeping disorders where you may fall asleep while you're in a meeting with somebody and, you know, people just have to roll with it. And then, or you may fall asleep on a grant, or you may fall asleep on the phone, or you take an Uber so you don't have to worry about crashing a car. That's me. You know, there's a lot of intersectionalities that we don't talk about. I don't often talk about my disability that I have. People are laughing because they all share the space with me that it's happened while I'm on the phone. So I usually have an extra person on the phone just in case it's happening so they can continue the conversation. They can catch me up on it later. So we all have these different challenges that we deal with on a daily basis. But doesn't mean that you can't be an amazing researcher if you have access. And so that means allowing individuals to be themselves, whether you have a visible disability or not, and also you have other things that fit into that space. And so I want everyone to think about action. This was a word that was, I think, really quoted on Twitter. I have to find out who that individual was that started that word. But I want you to realize this is not the word that I started, but this person started it on Twitter, and it was about idea. And I was like, this is an amazing word. And I've seen people actually start using it, even at the government level, for accessibility. So I just want you to keep that in mind. So as we end today, I want to start answering questions. And so if you have questions, please put them in the chat, the Q&A section specifically, or you can converse with someone like someone's already did about motherhood, which we really appreciate you talking about that. So I'm going to go to the chat for the Q&A question, and then we can go there. And so a couple of things. One person's already interested in talking about this, which I really appreciate, but I'm going to kind of open it up to get everyone's opinion. So if you are a white majority, if you're at a white majority institution or a predominantly white institution, I would say, what made you stay there rather than going to a minority majority institution where you would perhaps feel more comfortable, accept it, or appreciate it? So you go first, Dr. Sweetwine, go right ahead.
Yeah, I can speak to that. So for me, there were a couple of reasons. One, Seattle is where I grew up. So I left and I did my education elsewhere. And I had the experience of doing my education at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, where I was not in a white majority city. And that was a very comfortable and nice feeling for me. But I was still at a white majority institution, right in the middle of a non-white majority city. And so I think that one of the things that I think about when I talk to trainees, especially trainees of color, because that's what I associate with more, is I talk to them about the difficulty that you will experience and the isolation that you will experience, but also that you have the right to decide what space you want to occupy, and that you don't have to apologize for wanting to occupy that space. And so I'm a huge supporter of HBCUs. I think that they create something for this country and for, for STEM especially, that is just so valuable. But at the same time, I want to make sure that those spaces exist because they can, but not because they have to, and because there's no other way for people to get to where they want to be. And it's not realistic, I think, in a country the size of the country that we have, to ask that everybody go and segregate and concentrate in certain ways. I think we need to open that up. So part of the reason that I stay, even though sometimes it is challenging, I mean, genuinely challenging, is that I want to make sure that I get to choose what spaces I occupy, and that I get to choose what spaces my community occupies. And if you're a person of color, a lot of times what you hear is, you should take this back to your community. And I think that what should happen is my community should be allowed to go wherever they want to go.
I definitely concur with that. So I like to say that I'm an honorary faculty still at Winston-Salem State. Even though when I was a postdoc, I was faculty there, but I got my PhD, I think, from Baylor College of Medicine and Winston-Salem State, because there was a lot of help from Winston-Salem State. And so the reason I say that is because if I didn't have the undergraduate experience I did, I wouldn't have a better appreciation of how to navigate a predominantly white institution. One of my summer internships didn't go well, but what was so unique about the experience was that my HBCU supported me, and they still support me now in this faculty position. Like, I can contact the associate provost at at Winston-Salem State, and she'll talk to me about where should I be thinking about developing my scholarship? How can I do this to do this? And I'll talk to the chancellor, and they're all proud, and they take the individual time from the top to the bottom. You don't have to be me, you could be someone else in a different field, and they'll do the same for you. They'll contact you, say, here's my cell phone, I want to talk to you about this, just make sure you're okay. And so that's an example. And I do that now with the dean mostly at Winston-Salem State, where he's helping me navigate my career a lot. Dr. Bott's been very instrumental in doing that. And the reason I bring that up is because it's really the reason I'm staying at my place at Vanderbilt is because I've developed this network outside of Vanderbilt that allows for me to, thrive. And Vanderbilt's a part of that network, but it's not the only network that I have that exists. And so as a community, we have to work together to be able to tackle things that where, maybe at Vanderbilt or maybe at an institution that doesn't need to be mentioned, may have these spaces that exist that are safe, but other places in the institution may not be safe. I'm not saying that they are or not. It's just that, I don't know because I haven't experienced those things. And so in order to be able to shape that, you have to have a community to help uplift you. And then the thing is creating access to others. I enjoy so much creating access for individuals that look like me, similar to me, and share different identities, and be able to create a place that's safe for them. And then they can thrive, they can do well. And we all win in that case because you work closely with HBCUs, just other institutions, if you will. And then we work together on grants. We all work together to create space for ourselves to exist and the resources to do the continued work. So I'm going to target the next questions specifically to individuals. So one thing that Taylor, oh, you're welcome. And then one thing that Taylor said was, how do you promote and display DEI every day at work, personally, and within your community? What difficulties do you encounter when promoting, displaying DEI? And so who wants to go with that? Because that's a heavy question. Anybody can answer that question.
I would try to tackle it, AJ. So in my personal life, I've always been a people person. So that is, I have no problems there. Do I come across people who do not accept me for who I am? Yes, but that's their problem. That's not my problem. That's number one. That's not going to change who I am because you have a problem with either the color of my skin or the way I look or whatever the case may be. That's on you. That's not on me. What I do at work is, and anyone on this panel, a couple of you guys that I work with on a consistent basis know my number one belief is that everyone are human beings first, meaning that I'm going to treat you as such. It doesn't matter your gender, your ethnicity, your race, or your socioeconomic status. I can speak to you. There is nothing that says that I can't say good morning, good afternoon, how are you doing? That's what I do. One of the things I have learned in my journey is being a people person, and that's why I chose my field in psychology. I wanted to understand the mind of people, how they work, what makes them operate the way they do, what can I do to make a contribution to make that change in certain areas. And so I decided to study psychology. I mastered it. It was something that I believe is a God-given innate ability to just go and study people. And what I do with that is when I find out that a person is maybe having a bad day, just in the grocery store, you can see the change in a clerk or whoever that person may be. Just say, look like you're having a bad day. It's going to get better. Bless you. If I have extra change on me, I might give somebody more than the regular 10% or 20% tip. There are little things that you can do in just being a everyday person. Another thing that I do is I take interest in people. What concerns you, it may become a concern of mine. I'm going to listen. I may not have all the answers, but I may have a connection somewhere where I can refer you to. Second, on the job can be a difficult place because you have, especially in STEM education, it can be the isms that get in the way of people's growth. But again, it does not change who I am. I have, and AJ can attest, I didn't know, I asked God, why did you put me here? Because when I first came into WSSU, it was a big culture shock because I had always gone to predominant white institutions. And when I landed on the campus at WSSU, it was like, wow, it's a lot of isms. I didn't have that problem. I was standing in the face of chancellors, provosts, having a regular conversation, didn't know their titles. I wasn't impressed by their titles. I was impressed by them being a person. How can we work together? How can we collaborate? I'm not into titles. I'm into making things happen. I'm an action person. We can talk for a little while, but after a moment, I want to see actions. I want to see things on the table. If you don't want to do it, I'll do it. I'll put the things on the table and I'll gather the people and let's take action. So I have been around provosts, chancellors, mayors, governors, and they all had this one thing in common. They had a need and I had a solution. And so that started a consulting company. I now work with the city of Winston-Salem on certain projects. And I share with AJ, I said, I don't know how this door opened, but you know, my opinion matters. And so I'm going, again, it's about treating people like people. That's what you do. You treat them like people. Do not get so impressed about titles and this, that, the other, these schisms. I have stood up with people that I know did not like me for whatever reason, but I still greet them. How are you doing this morning? Is there anything I can help you with? Do you need some help with this? I'm willing to work on this. And that's what you do. Do you guard your way into their space? No. The door will open, but if you just start off with the little things, being nice, being intentional. I've had students to come to me, and at first they would blame me for things I didn't do. Like, I remember my first FYE class. A student came and said, I gave her an F. I said, oh, I didn't know I was giving those out. I am so sorry you got that. You earned that F. I did not give you an F. And she got so upset. And I said, look, I gave you warning after warning after warning. And you chose to ignore the warning. So this is the F that you earn. I never give out any alphabets. Trust me. And from that thought, that conversation, she said, oh, you know what? I didn't never think about it that way. I did earn this. I said, yeah, that's what you earned. You earned that F. If I was giving away anything, you know, I gave you a smile. I always gave you a good joke. I always open my doors so you could come see me. I even open my doors after office hours and you just ignored it. So you earned an F. And from that moment on to this day, she stops by my office just about every week to show me what she's doing. She took my advice after she failed the class, but now she's on her way to passing it. So it's those little things that we do. And in the community, I'm a strong advocate for my community. I will take it because I care about, this is where I live. This is where I stay. And I want to do whatever I can do as a citizen to be able to keep it up and to think about the next generation. I have nieces and nephews that I'm concerned about. I want to make sure they have the, if not better, lifestyle and option. So we always have option. It's up to you to choose which option that you're going to use, regardless of what you've learned in the classroom, but what you've learned in just being a basic human, just a human being. Because when we all go into an emergency situation, it doesn't matter. I heard this preacher said that if we're all on the same team and we're fighting, as long as we're pointing our guns in the same direction against the enemy, we're okay. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, green, yellow, Hispanic, gay. If we're having to fight with guns, if we're on the same team and we're pointing in the same direction, we're okay. But if you ever turn that gun around, we're gonna have problems.
So I thank you very much for that. And there's one last question about, are there any companies leading in DEI, and when, okay, and can we look into it? So there are companies leading in DEI, like the big Fortune 500 companies. Forbes usually publishes about those. So they'll say the top 20 for leading in diversity, equity, inclusion, and you will learn that some of those top 20 companies still have their issues as well. And then also there are other smaller companies that are investing in diversity, equity, inclusion around the consulting space. I preferably don't want to endorse any one particular one. How you can look those individuals up is based upon in the literature. So sometimes individuals that are having conversations about diversity, equity, inclusion, or talking about mentoring practices or leadership practices, you can reach out to them by email or by their university email. And then from there, you can have a conversation, and they're willing to talk about those particular areas, because we're representing the NIH and the Nrmn, so I can't tell you, like, you know, or endorse a certain company because it's just not allowed. But there are companies that you can reach into, and so that's how you kind of would navigate that space. Like if you saw like an article, and then just reach out to them and they can help you. You know, so thank you very much. Yes, sure, go right ahead.
So
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I just asked Dr. Hinton a question in the chat, which was, I just wanted to add a quick note about finding mentorship nationally. Just going back to our conversation about what to do when you're at a white majority institution. So Dr. Spencer said something really useful about, it's really helpful to be mentored by a person who sort of fits into some of the, identity minority spaces that you might fit into. But the reality is, in STEM, that's not possible for everybody. That's just not going to be available. And so in my department, for example, I am the only African-American in my department of over 200 faculty. So that means that students that come in, right, have me as an option. So if they don't want to study kidney disease and aging, they can go somewhere else. And you'd be surprised how many don't, even though it's the best topic. But so when I get students in my lab, or I come across students, for example, right now I have a African-American male undergraduate. I bring him into meetings that I have with Dr. Hinton about our collaborations, so that he gets access to other people that are in that space that can kind of serve as examples for him, or serve as mentorship in that space. So if you are somebody in your institution who is in the sort of majority side of the institution, but you're interested in being supportive of DEI and you want to know how to do that, one of the things you need to recognize is you may not have all the tools at your institution to be able to offer people what they need. So help them find it nationally. We found each other on Twitter, and this is how we started an actual scientific collaboration. If you yourself are somebody that feels like your particular needs are not being met in mentorship, You need lots of different mentors for lots of different things, right? You need a mentor that understands being a parent. You need a mentor that understands being an African-American or being gay, and so it's okay to have many, many people that are giving you input as you go through. And if you look around your institution and you don't see it there, reach out and start looking nationally and start asking people, because I think you'll find that there's more support there than you might recognize.
That was
I
really,
just
really
want to add on to that. I think it's the mentorship aspect is so critical, but I think we also need to discuss the importance of allyship, right? So sometimes that goes hand in hand with the mentoring, and understanding sometimes giving a support in more ways than one to someone who is experiencing negativity or not feeling welcomed in a space, and being an ally for that person, speaking up for that person, making them feel that they are understood, that they are actually being supported. I think that's another aspect that we need to talk about as well very quickly. And I know we're running out of time, but little things such as, going out, asking someone if they want to go out for lunch or, real quick, or a cup of coffee, exchanging ideas. Remember, what is gluing us together is the mission and the work that we're all sort of doing together. So that commonality, apart from everything else, should always kind of be in the core. And that's another way that we can always bring DEI into the forefront on an everyday basis. So just wanted to add that real quick.
Okay, that is really important thoughts from both of y'all. Thank you very much. And I just want to say, everyone that attended the panel, we really appreciate it. And of course, Nrmn has already put in the chat that there will be a recording done. It's going right now, and then we'll actually put that into the YouTube for you all, and then you're able to view that. So how you find that is just basically get on YouTube, type in Nrmn, and it should pop up. If not, try NIH Nrmn or something like that, and it should pop up. And then you'll be able to access any of the videos that happened over the three-part series that we had, excuse me. And we hope to do this again if time avails and schedules align. And we really appreciate everything that you've done for us in Nrmn and creating this space to talk about various topics that have been over certain weeks around Juneteenth. And we really appreciate that. That's nothing that is a small feat. It's a very large feat to do. So we're ending our talk. So everyone, this is the end. So thank you so very much. Panelists, if you could kind of stay on afterward, that would be very important so that we can have a debriefing. And we'll wait till everyone's off and then the recording will stop. Okay, so thank y'all very much, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. And on behalf of Nrmn, we want to just give another thank you to all of the incredibly talented panelists for having this incredible discussion today. And we do look forward to having more of these webinars. And then, as Dr. Hinton was saying, this will be added to our YouTube channel. And I will be sending out an email campaign with all of the recordings from the Juneteenth webinar series. So we do thank you all again for joining today. And then I will stop the recording now.